Mr. President, today I want to introduce you to Natalia, who I met just last week. Natalia arrived in Canada from Ukraine more than 10 years ago. Give us a wave, Natalia. She arrived in Canada from Ukraine more than 10 years ago. She's safe here with her family, but she still has a lot of loved ones in Ukraine. Every time she hangs up after speaking with a cousin or a friend, she feels a twinge in her heart, wondering if this conversation might be their last. Mr. President, we cannot and will not let Natalia's loved ones down. The Ukrainian people are counting on us. We must stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine with as much as it takes, as long as it takes. But I bring up Natalia now, not just because of what's happening over in Ukraine as we speak, but also because she's key to what we're building here today and tomorrow.
You know, I met Natalia in Nova Scotia last week. She currently lives near Bridgewater, which is a small town of some 9,000 people. For over 50 years, the Michelin tire plant in Bridgewater has been one of the most high-performing facilities in the world. It is thanks to the strength of the workers there that Michelin has just announced major investments to modernize its facilities in order to respond to the growing demand for electric vehicles. Good, stable jobs like the ones at that plant truly count for Natalia and her family, and they also count for our large and small communities.
Scotia meeting with Natalia and others, I met third-generation tire workers at that Michelin plant. And because of the work that we're doing together and investments we're making for the future, that community will have jobs for generations more to come. And that doesn't just impact them in Bridgewater. It means there will continue to be vans delivering food to grocery stores in California and trucks delivering medical supplies to hospitals in Pennsylvania that roll on tires made in Nova Scotia, as it should be.
I'm Amanda Fancy. I'm the dealer-owner of Gals Home Hardware and Furniture. We've been at this location for about a year. We started in 1848, way back when. This is our 5th location, so you know, we've never have left the town limits. So when we're looking to build this location, you know, we had lots of opportunity to potentially look at you know, outside of the town limits, but it was really key for us to be and continue to be a growing business in Bridgewater. Bridgewater, Nova Scotia is unique. We have a beautiful countryside. Our town is 7,500 people, but then, you know, our customer reach is about 45,000. So, you know, we're talking about lots of small communities, you know, hidden treasures. There's huge opportunity here, and I think that it's certainly worthwhile to make the visit, make the call, do some inquiring, because it certainly is somewhere where I think there would be some strong investment opportunities for sure.
My name is Joey Richard. I come from Quebec, Montreal. I've studied opera at the Montreal Conservatoire of Music, so this is where I've learned about Italian, the language, and the food. And my passion just became bigger and bigger for food. I've been cooking for 20 years, almost. I opened a family business, but the only thing I forgot is that my family is still in Montreal, so I'm like, I'm trying. I make new friends. I'm building this thing, but it is a family business here. My chef is like my brother. His wife is like my sister. So I mean, I recreated a family environment. We do the real recipes, starting from the real ingredients, and for Italian food, what the secret is. Few ingredients and very fresh. So each recipe would be like 3-4 ingredients maximum. But I mean, it's just the best ingredients and makes it so delicious. If you think that it's impossible to have your own business, I'm the living proof that it is possible. People want us to thrive. We work together. So everybody helps each other. If you want to be part of a community, it is the community to be part of.
My name is Joel Holland. I'm the owner and operator of 902 Athletics. I found the opportunity, started this gym in my parents' garage, and now we are currently in an 8,600 square foot facility. A lot of people come here because of the community. The things that we offer here are different than a normal gym. It's an open atmosphere where you come in, the music's played over the loudspeakers, not in your ears. You don't put earbuds in and just walk around from one machine to the other. You focus on yourself, but at the same time you get to meet new people. We have 3 floors, which we do CrossFit, boot camps, athletic training, and personal training. We have so many other businesses that are growing our economy and feeding into it becoming more populated, a place where people actually stay as opposed to leave. We're growing, we're getting bigger, and a lot of people are on the same push to become a better Bridgewater. I love this place. It's my home, and there is no other place that I would want my business to be.
right, good evening, everyone. I'll call this regularly scheduled meeting of Bridgewater Town Council to order. And as always, the town of Bridgewater is located in Mi'kma'ki, which is the unceded ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and it is our privilege to be here. Just a little change to the agenda. We'll do the introduction of new staff at a future meeting. So with that in mind, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Conklin, seconded by Councillor Thorburn. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And I'll just note that joining us virtually is Councillor Caldwell. So he's on Teams, but he will be part of the discussion and debate and also voting. And I will, because you can't see him on the screen right now, but I will advise council of his votes on these matters. Announcements. Any announcements from members of council for anything upcoming? Deputy Mayor?
Yes, Your Worship. I'd just like to announce about the South Shore Expo this weekend at the LCLC. So it's a home sport and travel show. It takes place starting Friday evening from 5 to 9, and again Saturday from 9 to 5, and Sunday 12 to 4. So there'll be everything from builders to contractors, realtors, home decor, designers, landscaping, outdoor, and living options. So be sure to stop by and see what's going on.
Great, thank you. And $5 for the whole weekend.
That's correct, yeah.
Any other announcements from members of council? All right, we're waiting for our delegation, but we're running ahead of schedule. So why don't we move down to minutes? We have the minutes of March 27th and the April 3rd special council meeting there. Oh, the April 3rd are not available. Oh, thanks, Rita. The March 27th regular council meeting minutes are there. Can I have a motion to approve? So moved. Councillor Tanner, seconded by Councillor McDonald. All those in favor? Those opposed? Councillor Caldwell is in favor. All right. As we're waiting for our delegation, why don't we go to our first planning item? So this will be a public hearing for the application for development agreement at 233 Logan Road. So as usual, I will adjourn the council meeting and call the public meeting to order, and note that all statutory requirements have been met. And I will now turn it over to Mr. Brown.
Thank you. All right. So this is the public hearing and second reading of the draft development agreement to allow an expansion to the existing manufacturing plant at 233 Logan Road. So here's the site that you might recognize as Michelin, located within the Bridgewater Business Park. Staff received an application from Michelin to construct a 11,375 square meter addition to the existing plant. This application is directly connected to the recent decision of council to close part of Logan Road, and council did so by policy at the regular council meeting on March 27th. The hatch polygon on this slide shows the 233 Logan Road property boundary. The circle hatch shows the area of the proposed expansion on the west side of the plan and where it would extend across the existing Logan Road. The zoning for the subject property is industrial, M1, and within the M1 zone, any addition to an existing development that exceeds 2,323 square meters requires a development agreement with council. The site plan shows the proposed plant expansion, again in the area of the present Logan Road and crossing over to the opposite side properties toward Highway 103. Michelin is presently assembling the land necessary for the expansion, and the draft development agreement specifies that such consolidation of lands would need approval through subdivision prior to permit issuance. The proposed building would look like the rest of the plant, so visually keeping with the current industrial style. The elevations proposed are at approximately 50 feet or 15 meters in height at its tallest section. The draft development agreement prescribes the permitted use, that being the use of the existing manufacturing facility and in addition to a maximum of 12,000 square meters, as well as the conditions that need to be met with respect to the engineering requirements, and the consolidation of lands mentioned a few moments ago. Many of the conditions are also connected to the Logan Road street closure, and so are being worked on concurrently. And as those relate to the development agreement, it's prescribed that all must be to the town's satisfaction prior to permit issuance. The agreement also includes articles related to buffering, landscaping, parking, access, wastewater and water services, and stormwater management. There was a public participation meeting scheduled for March 2nd. No one registered, and there's been no other public input to date. As far as the policy is concerned, the general policy related to the industrial zone states that the M1 zone is meant to accommodate industrial and commercial uses as of right. The supporting policy framework is found in Municipal Planning Strategy Policy M1, and that's that council shall concentrate industrial development within the Bridgewater Business Park to minimize the potential for land use conflicts in other areas of the community. The second policy here is not the reason for the development agreement process. I apologize. This shouldn't be here. The development agreement requirement is instead based on policy M8 and the size of the proposed expansion, the gross floor area being the trigger for council involvement, and not that the development is considered hazardous. But it does still lead staff to Municipal Planning Strategy Policy MDA1, and that industrial designation development agreement policy considers buffering and screening measures when the site abuts non-industrial, emissions, any health-related hazard or environmental impact, any infrastructure and land use master planning for the area, as well as the general criteria for all development agreements found in the implementation policy of the municipal planning strategy. Those general criteria include compatibility of the use, compatibility of the building style, so the architectural style, landscaping and buffering, the adequacy of infrastructure, service infrastructure, whether the site's accessible by emergency services, active transportation, parking, and other environmental impacts. Staff are satisfied that all policy criteria is being met with the proposal. As such, recommend that council give second and final consideration to the proposed development agreement and enter into the development agreement regarding the property at 233 Logan Road.
Thank you. Any questions from council? We've been through this for quite some time. It's pretty straightforward. All right, then the applicant isn't here, or no? All right. Any other comments? Okay, I will then adjourn the public hearing and ask for a motion from council. Councillor Thorburn.
I would so move that council for the town of Bridgewater enter into a development agreement regarding the property located at 233 Logan Road, PID number 600-23454, in a manner similar to the draft development agreement dated April 11th, 2023. It is shown in Appendix A of document 23-030D, and that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to execute this agreement and any other required instruments only within the time frame described in the development agreement. Should the document not be signed within the time frame described in the development agreement, council shall consider any request to sign the development agreement as a new application and follow the entire process required by the municipal government.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Tanner. I'll just add, this is very exciting. I mean, we had our kind of excitement a few weeks ago when this was officially announced. This is 5+ years of hard work by a lot of staff, most of whom are in the room today. You know, I can't imagine hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of time, but it secures the 1,200 plus direct jobs and thousands of indirect jobs for many years to come. So good job by all, but especially proud of our staff team. We have a mover and a seconder. Ready for the question? Question be called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. I'll just note that was unanimous. Thank you. All right, our delegation is here, so I will invite Steve Ellis to come to the podium on behalf of Pride Lunenburg County to talk about the South Shore Pride Week 2023.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Steve Ellis. I'm the chair of Lunenburg County Pride. Thank you to the mayor and to council for the opportunity to speak tonight. This is my first time appearing before council, and it's an honor to stand here as an openly gay man in the place I call home, the beautiful South Shore of Nova Scotia. Lunenburg County Pride is a non-profit organization that functions as an advocacy group and community for LGBTQ+ individuals of all ages and their allies. We are committed to building an inclusive community on the South Shore of Nova Scotia where everyone feels safe, secure, and respected, regardless of their sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. Lunenburg County Pride was founded in 2016. 2 of the founding members remain on the board as vice chair and treasurer. We are registered with the Registry of Joint Stocks as a society. In our mission to be an inclusive community, we actively engage with the public and speak out against any injustices. For example, a letter to the editor was published in a local newspaper, which used disparaging and homophobic language. The writer was displeased with the location of a pride crosswalk in Lunenburg. We responded publicly, which led to the editor of this newspaper to issue an apology in a subsequent edition alongside our public response. We challenged the warden of the municipality of Chester for referring to our community as being a lifestyle, which added to the false narrative that being part of the LGBTQ+ community is a choice. These discussions opened the door to meaningful changes within that municipality, which resulted in them now being one of the most accepting municipalities on the South Shore. In January of this year, we called on the Queen's District RCMP to publicly denounce the vandalism at the Liverpool Visitor Information Centre for what it truly was, a hate crime against the LGBTQ+ community. We also called upon all the mayors of the South Shore towns and municipalities to publicly denounce this crime, which they graciously did. Our combined actions resulted in the RCMP reissuing a statement and confirming that they are investigating this matter as a hate crime. Recently, we expressed concern for the transphobic words of an individual in Bridgewater who is currently before the courts. As you can see, a lot of what we do is to stand up against homophobia, transphobia, biphobia, and other injustices against our community. However, it's not all doom and gloom. We enjoy celebrating the diversity of our community in various ways. For several years, we have hosted pride flag raisings here in Bridgewater and neighboring regions. The event in Bridgewater has always been special, as it brings together not only our community, but our allies, politicians, and public figures. We have Colleen O'Neill and Jake McDonald to thank for that, as they spearheaded it long before we did. TD Bank in Bridgewater have been continuous and ardent supporters of our community by providing a barbecue and staff to cook and serve the food. We have been lucky to have generous community partners, such as the Atlantic Superstore Bridgewater and Sobeys Bridgewater, to supply cake over the years. Most importantly, the pride flag has flown high and proud for all of the region to see. Symbols of visibility like this are crucially important, not only for local residents, but for visitors as well. Last year, we hosted our very first South Shore Pride Week. It was a daunting task, but I'm glad to report that it was a huge success. Every single event we hosted drew large numbers of people, especially the Drag Queen Story Time at the Margaret Henniger Public Library in Bridgewater. There were over 130 people in attendance, which is the most popular event the library has ever hosted. In recent months, drag queens and drag queen story times have been under attack by closed-minded and bigoted individuals. The success of last year's event reiterated to us that there is absolutely nothing wrong with a drag queen reading stories of inclusion and diversity to children who are accompanied by their parents. Speaking of drag queens, we had several perform and dance the night away at our finale event last year, which was a drag show and dance in Lunenburg. This was our only ticketed event of the week, and we sold 116 tickets, which far exceeded our expectations. We also hosted a dog show, a senior lesbian social, pride trivia, and a pub night. This leads me to why I'm here tonight. This year, we're doing something that has never been done on the South Shore. We're hosting a pride parade. We recently announced that our parade will be here in Bridgewater on Sunday, July 9th, to kick off the 2023 edition of South Shore Pride Week, which goes until Saturday, July 15th. We feel that it's important for the South Shore to have our own pride parade. People travel from all over Nova Scotia to attend the Halifax Pride Parade, which is a massive celebration of our community. We envision our parade to be just as massive in terms of enthusiasm, but with a small town vibe. We will soon be reaching out to the public for parade participants and supporters. This is a major milestone for the local LGBTQ+ community, who've been craving more events in this area. Our success last year was proof of that. The parade will bring in people from the Valley, Liverpool, Shelburne, Halifax, and beyond. Not only does this help local businesses, but it shows LGBTQ+ people that Bridgewater and the South Shore is a safe, welcoming, entertaining, and diverse community. We request from Council in-kind coverage of the costs associated with the street closure needed to accommodate the parade, including public works and policing staff time as deemed necessary. Additionally, we request in-kind coverage of post-event cleanup along the parade route if deemed required by staff. We also request to direct staff to work on putting insurance coverage in place via the town's insurer, if possible, and that any costs associated with that be absorbed by the town via in-kind support. Failing that, we request staff assistance in securing insurance coverage for the parade. In addition to the parade, we will bring back some events from last year: the dog show, drag queen story time, flag raisings, and the drag show and dance, and introduce new events, including a comedy show, a seniors social, and a movie night. We request from Council a waiver of vendor fees for Pride Week events, and to grant in-kind support via staff time to assist in marketing and promoting the parade and Pride Week events via the town's social media accounts. In closing, I want to speak to you from the heart. It's not an easy time to be a member of the LGBTQ+ community right now. Many people are working diligently to harm us and remove basic human rights, especially south of the border. However, we as Canadians cannot be complacent. While Canada is a much more accepting space, homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia happens here every day. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's overt, but it's always there. Our advocacy and support work, in addition to public celebrations, not only affirm us as a community, but remind us that we were born this way and we're never going away. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from Council? Normally how, just for update, how requests work is we don't make decisions the night we get a presentation. I think you already know this. So this will come back to a future council meeting for discussion and approval or decision. Thank you. Approval. Decision. It could be approval. But are there any questions from members of the council? That's a lot to pack into a week. It'll be busy, but
we did it once before. We'll do it again.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. Deputy Mayor, yep.
Yeah. Do you have a parade route in mind that you're thinking?
Yes. So I met with the town previously, and we're going to use the Santa Claus parade route.
Okay.
So amassing at NSCC, going down Empire, and then turning right onto King, and then ending at King and Dufferin. And then afterwards, the street would remain closed, give or take, for an hour to allow people to kind of mingle and walk backwards along the route and go to FERC for a post-Pride celebration.
Okay. And would this be a Saturday or Sunday?
Yeah, it's Sunday, July 9th,
Sunday,
and 2 p.m. is the time that we're proposing for the start time.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you so much, Steve, for coming in.
Thank you, everyone.
Kind of like you're at the beginning of my day, and now you're at the end of my day. That's great. So we met earlier to discuss some other things that are pretty exciting, so that's great. Thanks for coming. Okay, we're back down to planning. Item 7.2, historic downtown commercial zone parking land use bylaw amendments.
So this is a staff-initiated application to remove surface parking lots from the list of uses that are permitted as of right on King Street within the historic downtown commercial, or the C1 zone. So this is a map of the C1 zone, shown in pink, but as I mentioned, we're just focused on King Street within the zone, not the rest of it. The historic downtown commercial zone is described in the municipal planning strategy as the central commercial district that offers retail, professional, and service-related businesses and complementary residential. So currently the land use bylaw permits parking lots and parking structures as of right in the C1 zone, excluding on the east side or the riverside of King Street. The planning documents were created in 2014, and at this time there were few vacant lots on the west side of King Street, whereas now there are some and always the possibility of more to come about. And staff have concerns, community development staff have concerns with more surface parking lots in the center of the downtown in lieu of uses and buildings that would help improve the appearance of the area and increase activity. So parking is a necessity and supply must increase with development, however, has some issues that need to be balanced. So it's challenging to determine the appropriate amount of parking, because too little parking could inhibit future growth, while too much can create vacant areas in town with little to no economic value. Parking is an inefficient use of land in a downtown compared to other land uses, which would encourage people to stay in the area. Parking lots, specifically, compared to on-street parking, can create dead zones between other uses, so they would reduce walkability as they're not engaging. And they also don't provide social value to an area in and of themselves. And excessive parking can also increase the number of vehicles within a street network because when there's parking readily available, it doesn't provide a reason for people to consider a shift in their mode of transportation, even if those were options. So during this process, staff reviewed various town policies, such as those listed on the slide, as well as best practice planning principles. So the municipal planning strategy has some relevant objectives, including improving the design and appearance of the built form to foster community identity and a strong sense of place, enhancing and protecting the historic downtown to strengthen its appeal as a destination for residents and visitors, and improving the pedestrian experience by promoting safe, accessible, and inviting streets and public spaces. Specifically for some policies, there's some that need to be considered, including the reduced parking requirements that exist for new development in the C1 zone. So no parking is currently required for commercial uses, and half of a parking space per dwelling unit is required for residential uses. However, developments by development agreement don't have to adhere to this. For some recently approved development agreements in the subject area, parking has been around or just above that half space per unit requirement. Compact urban form, adaptive reuse, and infill development is encouraged downtown. So compact urban form can contribute to a more efficient, lively, and walkable downtown, and it's not really supported when there's a large number of surface parking lots. Infilling parking lots with development can make a more effective use of land and can help create complete streets which are more dynamic and animated. And infill development not only promotes the efficient use of land, road infrastructure, and services, but can help revitalize underperforming areas of town and improve the appearance of the streetscape. Attractive commercial development is encouraged in the MPS, but parking lots don't contribute positively to that. And there are urban design requirements, which are referenced in policy, and parking structures with the amendments would need to adhere to them. So the Downtown and Waterfront Master Plan has relevant guiding principles listed on the slide again, and although parking is a necessity, these principles shouldn't be lost when incorporating parking specifically downtown. So the plan states that excessive parking requirements can create large surface lots fronting once lively streets, eroding the vitality of otherwise coherent places. The plan talks about how vacant lots can be detrimental, but they also provide an opportunity to be repurposed. The plan encourages alternative modes of transportation and states that when there's ample and cheap parking downtown, it's difficult to encourage this switch. And although the proposed amendments are focused on King Street, the plan looked at LaHave Street as well, so taking a step back and looking at the whole downtown, it's important to note the extensive parking that exists right now on that side, and that the plan encouraged a pedestrian friendly environment on both sides of the river. So the draft downtown parking study was also looked at, and the purpose of this study was to determine the demand for municipal on-street and off-street parking areas in an area that included the C1 zone, so it didn't line up exactly with the study area. I'll note that the parking study is a draft, so the information provided is what could be provided with that. The parking study looked at numbers, but didn't look at the sense of place, which wasn't in scope, and that's something that's important to consider for a downtown. The study area for this was separated into different sub-areas, and it found that there were 727 parking spaces in the area. The study said that the total parking supply is sufficient to meet the average and the maximum parking demand. However, there's a minor supply deficit in 3 different areas. There was also limited in-person analysis that was done with this study. So again, we can just take what the information from what was provided. The study shows that as an average, between 6% and 63% of spaces were occupied in the different sub-areas, while the maximum use was between 14% and 100%. However, instances of the supply being over 75% occupied was never for more than 1 hour consecutively at the times that they were looking. And at those times, other sub-areas in the area had an oversupply of parking. So it's important to note that those sub-areas are within about a maximum 10-minute walking distance of each other. The study also notes that parking systems are considered effectively full in the study when they're between 85% and 90% full, which more makes finding parking in the area difficult. The study briefly reviewed what parking projections might look like if future residential development was built as currently proposed. And based on this, the peak demand would be greater than the total supply for the study area, which does indicate the need to increase supply or to reduce demand. However, they also talk about that an increase in residential development in the area could reduce the need for that commercial parking downtown, which isn't accounted for in the estimates, and there's also just uncertainty as to what development will occur. The study suggests the need to optimize existing supply as one of the main solutions, and also be strategic with new supply. The proposed land use bylaw amendments that staff are proposing wouldn't stop the proposed improvements from the study actually happening. So a public participation meeting was scheduled. 1 person registered, and we had a phone call instead of a meeting, but overall they were supportive of the amendments. So just to quickly summarize the details of the proposed amendments, as I mentioned, it would remove parking lots from the permitted uses permitted as of right on King Street in the C1 zone. However, they'd still be allowed in the rest of the C1 zone. It would also amend amend requirements for parking structures in the C1 zone. So staff are proposing a maximum height of 33 feet, which is about 3 stories. There would need to be a commercial use for the ground floor, the building frontage, and about 50% of the ground floor area, which is what is currently required for multi-unit residential development on King Street. And there would be no vehicular entrances permitted on King Street. And that last provision about the entrances already exists in the land use bylaw for garages and carports. So it was proposed for parking structures as well. So this would restrict some properties from being able to have parking structures. However, urban design requirements can be varied by development agreement. Through development agreement, parking structures over 5,000 square feet and gross floor area are permitted. So if there was solid rationale, that could be varied. But the intention behind that restriction is to maintain an active streetscape, not reduce on-street parking spaces to accommodate a driveway, and to support pedestrian safety by reducing the amount of vehicles crossing a sidewalk. And finally, the definitions section would also be amended to not permit semi-enclosed parking structures, only fully enclosed, because those wouldn't follow the urban design requirements, and so those wouldn't be permitted with the amendments in any of the C1 zone. So staff recommend that Town Council give first consideration to the amendments and schedule a public hearing for May 8th.
Okay, thank you. Questions from council? Just for clarification for the public, because they might be seeing words that say, no parking on no parking lots on King Street, but we're not talking about closing the parking lots that we have on King Street. So just to make that clear.
Yeah.
So I just, because I imagine some people, that's the part they're going to catch. So,
Yeah.
don't worry about that. Any questions with that? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Conklin.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that Council for the Town of Bridgewater give first reading to the proposed amendments to the land use bylaws contained in Appendix A of document 23-011A and schedule a public hearing on May 8th, 2023 at the regular meeting of Council.
Thank you. A seconder to that. Deputy Mayor Fragier. Further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. All right, down to planning analysis report for 372 Aberdeen.
Thank you. So this application was received on December 19th, and it was to substantively amend an existing development agreement at 372 Aberdeen Road. So the location is shown here on the map. It is the Ridgewood Assisted Living Facility. It's shown as outlined in red. Just for some context, it's near the at the edge of town on Aberdeen Road, beside the Argyle Inn property. And the subject property is 4.67 acres. So again, for some context, this is what the existing building looks like from the street. There's currently 52 bedrooms in it. The current zoning of the property is comprehensive residential, or R3, and the property is designated, again, as comprehensive residential on the future land use map. The surrounding zoning and land uses are special commercial zone, agricultural zone, single unit residential and 2-unit residential zones, institutional zone, and more of the R3 or comprehensive residential. And there's also some nearby commercial. So the application is to expand the building and add 46 bedrooms within 2 phases. This is the proposed site plan of the property. So this is the property line, and the existing building is up front here, with phase 1 shown in gray, and then phase 2 at the back. So phase 1 would be an addition right to the back of the building that would be 9,600 square feet and 22 bedrooms. And phase 2 would be a further addition in 2 extensions, as shown on the site plan. And it would be, or they would be 8,400 square feet and 24 bedrooms. The closest the additions would get to the property line is shown here just at the bottom there, is 4 meters. And the other setbacks to the property lines would be approximately 8 meters on the same side there, or about 11, or between 11 and 17 meters on the other side. So these are some elevation drawings of what the building would look like from the back. The view from Aberdeen Road wouldn't change. The additions would be 1 story and would be similar style to the existing building. The top elevation drawing shows what phase 1 would look like, and then the second one is phase 2, so facing the other direction. The comprehensive residential zone is meant to accommodate a broad range of residential uses, modest commercial uses, and institutional uses, and the proposed use is considered institutional. The town's policy includes statements which aim to minimize conflicts between land uses, support a full range of housing options, require stormwater management, and analyze infrastructure requirements. There would be little impact to the adjacent properties and the land uses because the additions would be at the back of the property, and they would be a very similar design to what already exists. An assisted living facility, as defined by the development agreement, would provide a living option for those that are independent but do not require a high level of care, but also do require more support than what an apartment would offer. And in terms of infrastructure, sewage disposal would be constructed on-site instead of connecting to the town's infrastructure. Stormwater flows could not be higher than current peak flows, and the existing stormwater pond would be moved towards the rear of the property. Parking would be less than outlined in the land use bylaw, and no bicycle parking would be required. There's currently 34 vehicular parking spaces on the property, and they're underused. So a public participation meeting was held for this on February 8th. 3 members of the public attended. There were no concerns. They were adjacent property owners and just were attending to learn about the development. As I mentioned at the beginning, this application is for a substantive amendment to an existing DA, which comes out as a new DA. So the existing development agreement currently permits a seniors assisted living facility, and the development has to be designed in accordance with the site plan that's included in that development agreement. The maximum square footage is a substantial matter, so that's why a substantive amendment was required, because they're expanding that. And the existing development agreement is brief, but staff needed to write a development agreement that would incorporate necessary parts of the existing one, or of the existing development. So the new development agreement includes a definition for assisted living facility, because that's not a definition in the land use bylaw. So the definition would be a residential development composed of private or semi-private bedrooms with ensuite bathrooms and a central kitchen and dining area from which meals are provided. The development agreement outlines that the height, the massing, and the exterior design of the existing building and the proposed additions shall be in reasonable accordance with the elevation drawings that I showed. Setbacks shall be in reasonable accordance with the site plan. A maximum of 49 vehicular parking spaces would be permitted. So staff included the maximum parking permitted from the land use bylaw, just in case the applicant wanted any more in the future, although they have 34 spaces currently and they haven't requested any more. A paved pedestrian sidewalk would be required on the property, connecting to existing walkways. It would also connect to the new additions. And I'll just point out the only thing that has changed from the draft that you received is the location of solid waste. That was removed because it actually is currently in the, it already exists, and they aren't planning on moving it. But you can't see it because it's kind of set down. The property is set down from the road. So the development agreement stipulates that the additions may be serviced with on-site septic systems. So that doesn't permit the existing building to be, just the additions, because the additions are not within 100 meters from the street where central sewer is located. So that can be permitted by the public sewer bylaw. A downstream sanitary assessment was not required because they wouldn't be adding additional sewer to the town's infrastructure. However, if the additions do not end up being serviced on site, then an assessment would be required, as would any infrastructure improvements necessary. Additionally, a stormwater management pond would be required, and they would be moving the one that exists, and it would have to accommodate the additions as well as the existing building. And although the applicant has outlined 2 phases for development, phasing was not included in the development agreement because specific timelines are not provided, and staff do not have a concern if the 46 bedrooms were constructed at once. So staff recommend that council give first consideration to the development agreement and schedule a public hearing also for May 8th.
Any questions from members of council? Councilor Tanner?
Mackenzie, can you explain the on-site septic system again? It seems a bit odd to me, just as an outsider, I guess, just trying to understand why they would want to do that with 46 or whatever the number is added bedrooms, and why they wouldn't connect to our system.
There are capacity issues in that area, so if they wanted to connect to the system, they would have to do the downstream capacity assessment, which is required for all development agreements, and it's believed that there would be capacity issues right now, so it would be a substantial improvement that would be required to the system. So because of the location of these buildings, it falls under the public sewer bylaw, that because they're far enough away from the street that has our infrastructure in it, they can do on-site sewer, and they have enough space that they plan to do that.
That's a good question. Other questions? Councilor Thorburn?
Yeah. Once they do phase 2 and put in a 46 units to give them 98, is there any more room for development, or is that it on that property? Can anything else be added after that?
I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. I would have to do the calculation with the land use bylaw. I think there is extra room. Yeah, I think there is more room. If they wanted to add any more, they would have to go through a substantive amendment again.
And there's some farmland that can be built. Great, thank you.
Other questions or comments? None. Someone prepared to make a motion? Deputy Mayor?
Yes, Your Worship. I move that council for the town of Bridgewater give first consideration to the development agreement as contained in Appendix A of document 23-015A for 372 Aberdeen Road, and schedule a public hearing during the regularly scheduled council meeting of May 8th, 2023 at 6 p.m. in council chambers at Town Hall.
Seconded. Councilor McDonald. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. And then we're down to 7.4, MPS amendments to enable concurrent parkland dedication and subdivision land use bylaw amendments. Try to say it all to give you time to come to.
Quite a handle. Okay, so this is an initiation request for two sets of amendments to the municipal planning strategy and concurrently the subdivision bylaw with respect to parkland dedication requirements through subdivision. Due to the policy amendments necessary to change the regulations contained in the subdivision bylaw, this evening staff are seeking council's direction to continue with this work. This topic isn't new to council. It originates from the open space plan endorsed by council on May 10, 2021, and its recommendation to amend the municipal planning strategy and subdivision bylaw for parkland dedication. The purpose of these amendments is to create a more equitable distribution of open spaces or parkland throughout Bridgewater. Additionally, by what council may create through policy and accompanying evaluation criteria, more opportunity to contribute to existing parks and open spaces, and more control with respect to where new parks and open spaces may be located. These are two separate amendments for council's consideration. Again, staff are seeking direction to initiate these amendment processes. A thorough analysis of the existing policy in conjunction with the Municipal Government Act, as well as stakeholder engagement, would be completed prior to coming back to council for presentation of the proposed amendments. The first policy amendment would be designed to increase the percentage portion of usable open space to be dedicated for parkland or provided for through an equivalent cash in lieu value. Presently, policy dictates a 5% developable land contribution through the subdivision bylaw. The Municipal Government Act enables up to a 10% contribution where policy supports such an increase. Increasing the land or cash in lieu equivalent contribution would help to develop a comprehensive parks and open space network, as well as to ensure that open space is sustainably created alongside new development. Additionally, an increased cash in lieu transfer would be especially effective in repairing or improving the town's existing parks, open spaces, and related infrastructure. The second amendment directly relates to the first. However, staff are including two recommendations with separation as each can stand on its own. Presently, in accordance with the municipal planning strategy and subdivision bylaw, the option to transfer land, cash, or an equivalent contribution rests with the subdivider. Amending policy with clear evaluation criteria so that the town has the final say in what type of dedication the developer makes would help maintain and, where possible, enhance Bridgewater's open space network. This policy amendment would also allow the town to distribute parks and open spaces based on the spatial analyses conducted as part of the open space plan. Through council's policy, this amendment would clearly define the evaluation criteria to inform when the town would accept land, cash in lieu, or a combination of both. And the funds would be distributed based on the parks improvement plan of receiving cash in lieu. So staff are recommending that council direct the continuation of work related to both sets of amendments to the municipal planning strategy, and after a comprehensive review and analysis, bring back those proposed policy amendments as well as the subdivision bylaw amendments for council's further consideration.
Questions, comments? Yes, Mr. Brown, so we've discussed this a few times. I certainly like council and staff working together to have a little bit more say in what we receive and certainly where it is, because we talked about this before. If Councilor McGinnis was here, he'd talk about when you donate a parcel of land for park, you're not probably donating the cash to maintain it. So it's great because it's free, but it's not free after year one because we have to insure it, maintain it, clear it. So this would allow us to help, if it's cash in lieu, especially at a greater value, maintain the parks and green space that we have. So, any other comments? No, someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor McDonald?
I move the Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater direct staff to work on the requested amendments to the municipal planning strategy and the subdivision bylaw to increase the percentage portion of usable open space to be dedicated for parkland or provided through an equivalent cash in lieu value, and also direct staff to work on the requested amendments to the municipal planning strategy and subdivision bylaw to create clear policy criteria that would enable staff to make an informed decision on whether it will accept land or cash of equivalent value through the subdivision process.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thorburn. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. I should let you know, Councillor Caldwell, that we can see you on the big screen now. That's why we can see you more clearly. So. All right, we're down to correspondence for information. We have application for flying the pride flag for July 11th to 18th, 2023. This is just for your information. So as you recall, we changed the policy. So this group has applied in the past and it's been approved by council. So it doesn't need to come back to council for reapproval. They just need to apply each year that they like to fly their group's flag. And in this case, this group has done that. And so it goes right to the CIO's desk, and so that is just there for your information. And a good reminder that the pride flag will be flying from July 11th to 18th. But the flag raising ceremony will be at the Des Brisets, and then the flag will be raised, and for the week it will be down at the community flagpole at Shipyards Landing. All right, down to reports and recommendations. We have the briefing notes from the April 3rd discussion session. So these are all our meeting documentation for the public's benefit is available on the town's website under council. So on that meeting, we discussed pedestrian crossing control and specifically rainbow crosswalks, which we had another meeting this morning about. We talked about the Housing Accelerator Fund and how best to work within that. We talked about development and infrastructure charges, and also our inclusive economic growth plan. So all those notes are available and documentation on the town's website. So down to business arising and unfinished business, just a couple more items before we get to the fun topic of the budget. Okay, so tender for High Street and St. Philip Street upgrades. Hopefully this is not a sign of things to come.
Good evening, everyone. As you're all aware, in our pre-approvals for budget in January, we asked to acquire funds for a High Street and St. Philip's construction tender upgrade. In that project, we were expecting to do water main, sewer, and storm sewer upgrades, along with limited AT upgrades where possible and street reconstruction. The project estimate from our consultant was approximately $6.9 million, and we had a town budget of approximately $8.3 million. Tender was issued in March, early March, March 3rd, and it closed on March 29th with 2 acceptable bids. Unfortunately, the low bid price was a total tender cost of $14,393,018. So staff reviewed both tenders and we did consult with legal, and at this time our recommendation includes a couple of steps. We're recommending that council cancel this tender, and we will take the tender package. We will redesign extensively the St. Philip's portion of the project, because there are 2 separate streets in this project. St. Philip's would be dramatically reduced in water main size and depth, which would also improve the depth and also the scope of the sanitary and storm work. It will reduce the amount of road work that has to be completed, and there would be some minor changes on the High Street portion of the project. Then it would be our intention to retender both packages, probably separately, so that we could achieve at least construction of one of these packages in this fiscal year, and the other one we would at least get a start on and hopefully finish it in next fiscal year. Are there any questions?
Any questions from council?
So Tanner, I'm guessing what the answer is, but why would we downsize the piping? If we tendered at one size, obviously feeling we need it, why would we then?
We had originally, St. Philip's Street, we had originally put the largest main we could to provide the largest fire flow to the future business park lands. But when we do that, it becomes extremely deep. It becomes an extremely large main to deal with both in construction and future forward. So although we were trying to achieve that, the market just is not gonna tolerate it. And it is a very, very difficult project when we put that forward. We had hoped we could do it, but when we went back to our consultant, we did ask to see what the impacts were, and it will reduce the fire flow probably about 1,000 gallons a minute, but we would still be able to sustain the 2 to 3 hour duration that we need, which, depending on when it happened during the day, if we had such a large fire, right now the business park would still get more protection than they have currently, but less than the maximum. So what we'll have to do is anybody who buys in the business park, they will be alerted of that, and they'll make sure that their building construction compensates for it.
So I guess my fear is that 10 years or 15 or 20 years down the road, we're going to end up paying for this decision, so to speak, in one way or another. Do you foresee the need for a water tower then at some point, similar to what we're doing at?
Water tower was an option early on, but there just wasn't enough build out to really make the turnover in the water tower that we had hoped. With the pipe sizing upgrade, it would allow at least the turnover that we're looking for. So we try to balance two things. We try to balance water quality and fire flow, and that seemed to be the best balance. We certainly will look at it given this, but I expect we'd still go with the smaller main.
Other question? It's frustrating. Deputy Mayor Fitzgerald.
Yeah, so if you go back out to tender with two different packages, one being St. Philip's and the other being High Street, are you prioritizing one project over the other? You'd be doing St. Philip's?
We would be prioritizing based on the level of tender revision that's needed. So High Street is virtually ready to go.
Okay.
High Street came in very close to our original estimate. We just have to make some minor modifications there, so it will go likely first.
Likely first, okay.
We, this afternoon, CAO and myself and a number of staff met with the Minister of Rural Economic Development, so Minister Hutchins, and we spoke directly to this issue of, we're almost a victim of our own success. So we've done all the right things to entice all this growth. But the problem is, and our Director of Community Development put it up on a slide beautifully, we're a town of essentially 9,000 taxpayers trying to service 60,000 people. So we only have the revenue from those 9,000 trying to support essentially the hub of the region. And this is a clear example of something that's coming in millions of dollars over budget, because we don't, we're not in the right market, and it's, I mean, it's a big project, but it's frustrating. And so when we go to speak to our federal or provincial colleagues, like there's so many things that need to change for us to be able to continue to move forward at the pace we want to move forward at. And again, we're doing all the right things, whether it's transit or energized Bridgewater or progressive policy changes, trying to make sure we have good drinking water, with good quality drinking water. It's always going to be easier to not do these things, but it's not the right thing to do. So, do you want to add anything?
In terms of the sewer on St. Philip's, I may have missed it, Audrey, but did you describe what was going to change there in addition to changing the size of the main we're looking at?
So storm sewer, we will be doing a shallower storm sewer because obviously we're bringing the water main elevation up, so the storm will also go up. And sanitary, it will be repairs only. It will not be a full sanitary sewer upgrade.
Yeah. The other thing I would point out is that we did have this work estimated and before we went out to tender, so we were at the time fairly comfortable with the numbers because our consultants looked at market prices for quantities and labor and equipment, and And so it was based on the most recent numbers that they could base it on. So this was a surprise, I think, to the two firms that had worked on this project, as well as staff. Talking to others, it seems to be a trend in terms of what tenders are coming in at and construction prices are coming in at to get work done. So it's a little bit of a wild guess right now.
Well, it's frustrating. As we can sense around the table. Councillor Thorburn.
Councillor Tanner, I'm on the same page as him. I like this. It's too bad we couldn't do the original designs because it will save us money today, but will cost money in the future because we're doing less than we should be doing. And we know we should be doing more. Is there any way we can pressure the federal or provincial counterparts to come up with some more funding to see the full project go ahead as planned by the consultants?
So
To give you the peak flows?
not for a lack of trying.
No, there's definitely been some conversations had, and they're in the same boat as we are in terms of this particular project.
Yes.
The province is significantly they're over budget. And then, when we signed the contribution agreement, they were clear that they would fund the water line work on St. Phillips and High up to the value that was estimated, which was 2.9. That included construction and design, and any cost overruns were to be the responsibility of the town. So I have had those conversations to say, look, we put an extra $1.5 million in the budget, thinking that, it's going to go over, and hopefully this gives us, we weren't anticipating we need $8 million put in the budget to cover that between what we bid. There are also limitations on other funding that we're applying for that doesn't allow us to stack dollars. And the province is aware of our capital, and I've had that meeting with them to go over our 10-year capital plan and all the big projects we have. Some of the struggles is their money's often coupled with federal dollars, which we can't stack. So if they come up with some funding schemes where it's provincial money on its own, then they know what we're looking for.
We're just too damn busy. There are too many projects on the go.
Well, and that's the discussion that we're having with the province especially. So you're targeting doubling the population. You're targeting all this growth.
Yeah.
Well, we're a big part of that, which is great. But if we don't have the offsetting funding, and again, we speak about this every time we have a minister here. If you're going to continue to deploy funding based on a population-based model, not a needs-based model, then you're handing out infrastructure dollars to people who don't have infrastructure. And again, going back to that, 9,000 taxpayers, so we get a fraction of what some larger municipalities get, but they literally cannot spend the money because they have zero infrastructure, but they still receive the money. So we know of a number of municipalities that are sitting with $10, $15, $20 million of reserves that they cannot spend. And Audrey would spend every dime in 5 minutes if she could, because here's a great example. You've got a $7 million piece of pipe, and we get our $675,000 worth of gas tax. What's that, like 5 feet of pipe? So we've explained this. We explained it again today. I did sense some encouragement. This was the first minister that's spoken to us that recognized that hub communities like Bridgewater, if you think of the regional urban models, they all tend to be hub communities, face a different set of hurdles, right? Where we have to service that 60,000 people in the 2 counties with a tax base of 9,000. So it's impossible to meet provincial and federal targets with the funding that we have.
And there are, one of the things we did look at is, are there things that we could not do to help offset the cost of the overage on this tender? Most of our capital is wastewater.
Yeah.
And there's a time frame under which we have to get that done. Changing the scope of that creates complications for funding. There's the road reserves that we're looking at constructing at exit 12A. that don't come near the $7 million or $8 million that we need. I think it's about 1.8 perhaps with the road reserves and the stormwater management pond. Not doing that limits your possibilities, which is why you wanted to do that in terms of development out there. So there's not a lot of room, not things that we can cut that can hit that target that we need to make that water main the size that we originally went for in terms of fire flow. In terms of fire flow, Audrey, is there a way, because one of the things you explained to me is that what was being designed was fairly generous in terms of the fire flow rates and perhaps a higher rate than some urban centers provide.
Yep. So what we had designed is the max fire flow for a business park that would have huge users. So what we're looking at now is we would have dramatically more than the average residential fire flow and still support what Michelin has now or you know, a bit more than what Michelin has now. So we're not limiting the business park customers. Halifax will only provide somewhere in the same range that we would be looking at with this downsize. So it's a risk, but it's definitely something that most people coming to a business park would expect.
Yep. So 2 questions. The first is, did we go back to the consultant that gave us the estimates and ask what happened?
We did.
Yeah. And what was their?
And of course, our explanation is always that, you know, it's a very
It's the market.
dramatic market at
Okay.
the moment, and the unfortunate part is in your package you'll see both bidders are very close.
Yeah.
So there aren't a lot of subcontractors coming in and suppliers, so they're not getting the competition for these bids that they used to.
Right.
And we're seeing it.
So the second question is, I can't remember the diagram now, but where does that, so when we start developing exit 12A on the other side, how does that loop come down? Like, is it split like this for fire flow for exit 12A as an example?
For fire flow, well, we'll be counting on the fire flow to come through St. Philip's Street is what we'll be looking at coming and supplying. That's why this larger main is kind of going to be part of the backbone.
So that would go to the booster station, and then from the
And then
booster station up to the connector road?
across.
Okay.
There were initially a couple of options, but this was to be the more economical of the options.
Other questions?
It's the best of the worst that we can hope for.
I mean, it's I feel better with your follow-up comments that, you know, it still meets or exceeds what they have now, and it certainly meets what it sounds like what's standard in other areas. I know that the fire chief's sitting at the back and former chief is to my left here, and you know, those 2 gentlemen would prefer to have as much water at any given moment as needed, but I do feel a little bit better that you're saying that, you know, we were going above and beyond, and this just takes us to where we for sure need to be, and maybe a little bit better. That's Thurman.
I'll make the motion, Your Worship. I feel better now that she added that piece about Halifax, so we really are doing a little bit more than we have to do, but not quite what we would like to do. Is that the fair statement? So I will make a motion
Please,
that council for the town of Bridgewater cancel the current tender HFX-2102098-AO High Street and St. Philip Street upgrades due to the bids received being well over the budget for the project, and direct staff to complete the full rescope of the St. Philip Street portion of the project to be retendered as soon as possible.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor McDonald. Further discussion? Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. 11.2, we have just notice from the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board regarding council size, just acknowledging that.
Yep, approving the
It is
application.
approved.
Yep, so council size remained as 6.
There's no mayor anymore, just council.
Yeah.
Right, as the media is here today too, so this, there's your There's your 7 o'clock news story. Counselor Tanner. All right, so we are down to the 2023-24 budget. Just waiting for the CAO to get set up. So staff will go through their last presentation for this. And then, so this is your chance for all your questions, comments. Staff are here.
Okay, here we go. So the budget has been updated to reflect the changes that council had made, as well as there's a few other changes that were made minor, but they're detailed in the presentation, just to bring the number up to the most current and recent that we would need. So the operating budget is proposed at $28,820,259, and that's actually an 11% increase, not 9.8. And the capital budget is $14.76 million. The budget has been prepared, the copy that's included in the agenda, with a tax rate of $185 per $100 of residential assessment. So that's a 10-cent increase, and commercial at $407, which is a 10-cent increase. And then you have the LCLC special purpose tax. The wastewater rates that are proposed in the draft budget are residential at $518, and we'll show you what the increases are there, with the additional unit being $328 for each additional unit. Hotels at $1,109 plus $79 per guest unit. Hospitals at $4,922 plus $79 per patient bed. And commercial and other, which includes all other institutional, industrial, commercial uses, at $1,109 plus $742 per additional user. And then through this budget, council's strategic priorities are implemented. So there's a number of activities that have been outlined for council. Wasn't planning to repeat them here, but if council wants to, we can, but they do kind of fit within your key focus areas. So community prosperity, there's a number of infrastructure projects that we're working on that, as we indicated, total a significant amount in terms of capital, millions of dollars being spent on upgrading our infrastructure, and the Exit 12A interchange project. Placemaking and quality of life, there's a number of initiatives that are being proposed within this budget that council wishes to achieve, from accessibility to active transportation, open space plan implementation through park development, affordable housing initiatives, the tiny shelter grant continues, and then there's the Energized Bridgewater reducing energy poverty proposal at $1.8 million. There's also, we continue to fund our recreation facilities. There's support for nonprofit organizations, so grants are $44,000 to nonprofits, and we also provide tax exemptions that equate to $111,000. And then there's low-income property tax exemption to our residents, and that's at $65,000. And you'll see that there's been a change, that number represents a change that was made from last budget as well. Pro Kids grants are also proposed at $16,000. And we continue to invest in all of our emergency first responders, so fire, police protection, and REMO. This year we actually have commenced the community navigator position, and we are collaborating on a regional basis for an anti-racism, inclusion, and diversity coordinator and committee. In terms of fiscal responsibilities, there's a number of initiatives that are being undertaken this year. Reserves, and the wastewater reserves, you'll see that number's changed from our last meeting. So $1,036,043 is proposed to be transferred to wastewater reserve, and that's a combination of both your betterment charges as well as the reserves that you're able to fund through your sewer rates. We continue to source grants, and those are reflected in the capital plan. Asset management will be undertaken this year. We're continuing with the internal control audit and fraud risk assessment, and as recent as today, we had a meeting with the management team on fraud risk. And infrastructure charges will be looked at and developed this year, and there's the cost to do that study, and assess our infrastructure to determine the charges necessary, and so there's $200,000 proposed for that. And then through organizational excellence, we're looking at privacy management, developing a framework and program there. Regional building inspection, records management continues, and we continue to work on our internal control measures. So this is your budget, $28,820,259. As indicated, that's an 11% increase. The tax revenue is proposed to increase by 14% from last year. And then we have other revenues to help fund the rest of the budget through non-tax revenues, which can be fees, sale of services, grants, and then we have transfer from reserves, which is down from last year. We're focused on putting funds into reserve this year. This chart just shows you where your tax dollars go. And as you can see, some of our big consumers are police, wastewater, engineering, mandatory contributions, which are our funding of provincial services, are a big piece of the pie there as well. And then we go to recreation, parks and culture, and it goes down from there. And this is how your revenue, your budget is funded, where the revenue comes from. So 85% of our revenue comes from taxes, our tax revenue. Mandatory contributions have increased by 7.3%, so we had gone over this already, but that represents $189,929 as a pressure in your budget. So education's the big contributor there in terms of the increase. It was an 8% increase from last year. These were the significant changes in the baseline that we had presented to council already. These have been updated to reflect any changes that were made. But you can see the ins and outs. So anything that has a bracket around it are added cost or increases, and anything without would be a reduction. So we're funding less capital from operating this year from last year, so that's a change in the baseline. And you can see that we've, all the other increases that we've had there. So some of the big ones to kind of note in there are the energy and fuel and insurance costs that have increased. Salary and wage salaries for both union and non-union are at $868,000 increase. We have a fire protection rate, and so those are your hydrants. And the cost to provide fire protection is increased to by $190,000. And we have transfer to wastewater reserve, which is increasing as well. But again, there's revenue coming in to offset that piece. So those are some of the bigger ones within that. In terms of how your budget's laid out, we show you your budget from last year, the adjusted baseline, so that's if you did nothing new, just your core delivery of services, no new initiatives. Your adjusted baseline is $27.7 million. And so that is approximately a 7.1% increase over your budget last year, or $1.84 million. And your additions represent $1.5 million, and then we've removed from the budget 478. So those are been taken away and won't reappear. So that gives you your revised budget of $28,820. This slide here shows you your operating reserves. Again, we had gone over this with council, but we have revised it to reflect the funding going in from sewer rates that would be changed by changing the uniform charge for sewer. As indicated by Kim at the last meeting, any increase in the rates go to the reserve, because the sewer rate's already funding the operating and the debt and interest, the principal and interest cost. And the reserves, as we'll show you later, are necessary to help fund future capital. These are your capital reserves, a little bit of a lower number than your operating reserve. And so the estimated balance at the end of March, this present fiscal year, March 31st, 2024, would be $2.7 million. And we're starting off with 3.6, but we are funding 1.5 from capital projects from reserve. So we are taking some money out, more than we're putting in. And then you could say the same thing for operating too. We start at 11.9 million, but with all the ins and outs, we land at 9.5 million at the end of the fiscal year. This shows your 10-year capital plan. It's provided for you within your capital or your budget document as well. It shows you that how much we anticipate based on our understanding of our infrastructure requirements over the next 10 years, how much we'll be spending. And as you can see, the numbers are fairly significant over the next couple years, 4 or 5 years. And as it starts to get a little hazier in terms of projecting future need, the number goes down. So this year there's 18.7 in capital carry forward. So we carry the total value of the project over into each fiscal year until it's done. It doesn't mean that there's 18.7 million in work being done and under that number. Some of it's already been done, but we don't finance it or fund it fully until it's complete. And there's $14.7 million proposed for this fiscal year in the capital budget. This shows you the debt affordability or the projected debt ratio, so what debt's required to support that type of capital investment. So you can see that we do exceed the guideline of 15%, and we get there pretty quick in 26, 27, and we stay there for a little bit of time as we invest in our infrastructure. Our capital budget is based, so you'll see there that we have how much we anticipate funding from operating, how much we'd fund from gas tax. Gas tax is a known entity for the most part, so we can kind of project that one fairly accurately. Grants is based on what we're confident in. So if there's new programs that come out, of course we'll apply for that, and any grant funding we get will help lower the amount that we have to borrow. And then you can see the debt, how much we're going to be funding from debt and how much we're proposing to fund from reserves. So that debt that we're proposing translates into your debt service ratios, but more importantly, it translates into what your debt servicing costs are. And this is the number that you'll see in the operating budget. And so you'll see that in the future, a slide coming up, we show you some projections about what rates are needed to kind of support our costs as we start to encounter increased debt servicing costs. So we go from about 1.5 perhaps, not quite 1.5 million, up to over 5 million by 2032. So there's a fairly consistent increase, and that's reflective of the borrowing that we have to do to support our budget or our capital plan. This shows you how we propose to fund this year's capital budget. So this year we will be borrowing 7.2 million. There's 4.2 million in grants. We'll be using $1,040,850 from operating, so from the tax rate. And we'll be using 1.65 million from reserve, from the operating reserve, and 150,000 from capital reserves. And we had already gone over this slide, but often the question's asked when you look at your reserves and how much we're pulling out to fund capital, how much remains in, and how much we put in every year, what's kind of a good measure of what your reserves should be at. So this just kind of shows you that in the operating, we're doing pretty good. The recommended guideline is not less than 2 months of general operating fund expenses, so that's 16.7. The financial condition index that the province puts out indicates that 20% is low risk for municipalities, and we're at 37.9. Capital, council set a policy saying that we'll target 10% of our operating fund expenses as the number to have in capital. And right now we are at 8.6. So higher in the operating and a little lower in the capital, but operating is more flexible in terms of how we can use that. So these are the revisions that were made to the budget that was originally presented to council. So council had asked for some things to come out, and some changes, and then Kim and her team had some things that they knew had to change based on just becoming aware of them before the budget got finalized. So we updated the firefighters honorarium to reflect CPI based on some comments that were made by council. There's some reallocate town suite fees to planning, small amount. Increase in the residential and commercial tax rates, so that's revenue coming in, and that's based on the 10 cents. Then as I indicated, we increased some of the low-income exemption amounts for the tax rate, understanding the tax rate was going to go up, and that would increase perhaps the amount that an individual qualified for. So there's been some funds put in there for that, as well as the nonprofit tax exemption as well. Change in the sewer rates would result in, based on the proposal in the budget, would result in an additional $77,707 coming in as revenue, and then we just turn right around and put that into the reserve. So that's why you see the in and out there. Then transfer to the operating reserve. So when you put the 10-cent rate increase on, it will result in a surplus, which is going to be used to fund or build up our operating reserve. So that $315,000 goes in to the operating reserve. The Legion cameras, that's an in and out that we show. And then council had asked that the winter route review be removed. And so there was $50,000 taken out of the budget for that. So that's for the winter maintenance routes. Police radios were originally proposed to be funded with the tax or the operating budget tax rate, and council opted for the police reserve. So that had a positive impact. There's $15,000 that was proposed in the budget for grants to organizations, for operational grants for organizations that are repeat visitors, and they apply every year for operating funds. And council removed that, and we're just remaining at the $29,000 for grants for organizations. There is an addition for e-procurement license, again, a small adjustment that staff became aware of. Estimate for town suite migration costs. This was a surprise, but we just got notice from Town Suite that they are going to be moving to the cloud, all their e-services. And so that's a cost to us that we weren't anticipating. So we're providing some funds for that. A small adjustment in the library rent based on some revised information, and an increase in the LCLC budget based on the budget that the board finally approved. So when you make all those adjustments, understanding in the beginning we started off with a deficit of $589,000, adjusting the tax rate and removing a few things, and moving more funds to the operating reserve by adjusting the tax rate, it all balances out to zero. And that's where we need to be. So when we had our meeting last week, we were down to a couple scenarios. As indicated, the budget's drafted based on a 10-cent tax rate increase, but we do know that there was some discussion about an 8-cent as well. This chart here shows you that with an assumption that we're going to be increasing the sewer rate by 20% for the next few years, and understanding what would happen, what you need to fund not only this year but future years, understanding in this model, it kind of projects out what our operating costs are going to be. It has some conservative assumptions in there about what CPI is going to be, cost increases, those types of things, as well as our debt servicing cost. And it kind of shows you that there's some brackets which are negative numbers as we move out. If we don't increase the tax rate, we have to cut $448,000 still. With the 5-cent tax rate increase for this year, we have to look at, we're in a deficit of $29,000. 8 cents brings you to the good by $221,000, and 10 cents by $388,000. And one of the things we had suggested to council is that you can do that dive every year and have, the rate fluctuate, and just look at it on an individual year basis, or you can look at tax rate stabilization. So how do we kind of level that out and provide some predictability to the ratepayers? And this is proposing that if you want to take that longer term view, it shows you how many years those cents will give you in terms of staying to the good side of zero. And you can see that it's that, well, 5 cents you're not to the good side of zero, but you could probably cut for the next couple of years. 8 cents, it's 2 years, and then 10 cents it's 3. So that's part of the conversation we had is do we want to look at that, take that longer view when you're looking at your tax rate? Any surplus, so the 380, if you did 10 cents, the 388,000 is going to reserve. So and that is probably not enough going into your reserve based on what your capital requirements are, right? And so anything you can put into reserve is a good thing, given knowing what we have to do over the next 10 years. The tax, did you have?
Sorry, just a question, Tammy. So these projections here, are they based on consistent market assessment?
So there's an assumption of assessment growth, and I believe Kim's done 5 years next year, and then you bring it back down to 2 or 3?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, 5?
Next year. So in 5% increase, yeah. So 24, 25, you looked at a 5%, and then was it 2 or 3?
Because we know there'll still be, there's a delay, so we know we should have 1 more year of assessment increase, but after that, we're really unsure.
Yeah.
And again, conservative, because we really don't know where those market values will go after that. If we look at just prior to 2020, we were stagnant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, that 5% for next year is probably pretty low, I would think. Hard to say.
It depends on the number, there's some assessment changes for old sales, but there's not as much activity as there had been the previous 2 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So if our assessment base grows, faster than we project, then that's a good thing, right? And every year you can take this look, right? And kind of see where you are, and grants, all those things affect this model. There's lots of variables in here, and it could look very different next year.
To me, that's the big one, right? We hope for the best, but plan for the worst, and if we get additional grants, then when we look at our debt service ratio, if we get large grants, then we'll hope to keep that under that 15% or lower. That's our heavy lifting for the next couple of years. Is going to be working with the other levels of government to say, like, it's great that there's all these little pots of money, but $100,000 here, $200,000 there doesn't help us with the $50 million wastewater mandate that we have with a looming deadline.
I think this to that point, this slide demonstrates that we need big dollars to really impact our debt service ratio. So increasing your tax rate by 10 cents doesn't do a lot to your debt service ratio. So even a couple $1 million in grant funding doesn't do a lot to your debt service ratio. It's because we're dealing with big capital investments. So we definitely need to find other sources. So this just shows you what does a tax rate, what's the impact to the homeowner, right? Like, how does that translate? So you have to remember that this year the capped assessment has increased. So that's the middle column there. And you can see that if we just increase the sewer rate, as that's kind of based on council's previous directions to increase that to get to a more fairer rate. A property owner that has a capped assessed value of $170,000, which would have been $158,000 the year before, will pay an increase of $250. With the 10-cent tax rate, that 250 goes to 420, so it's an extra $170 that that value of a home would pay. If we looked at a home that in 2023 had a 22-23 had a capped value of $300,000 with the capped assessment increase and the sewer rate increase, you would pay $448 more. With the 10-cent tax rate increase, that would go to $771. So that's a difference of $328. So that's what that looks like, and that's what a resident would see. So in terms of the sewer rate proposal, at our last meeting, we kind of stopped here. We got to talk about the tax rates, and then we talked a bit about the sewer rate and kind of where we wanted to go with that. And as indicated, we kind of had to take a stab at where we thought that council would like to land based on some of the conversations that were had. So Kim's prepared it based on that conversation to show that the residential sewer rate increases by 6.1, so it goes up to 517 from 487. The additional sewer rate will increase for additional units will increase by 60%. From 185 to 200.
This is the original slide, Tammy?
That's the original one, yeah.
Oh,
we don't get to this until slide 33, sorry.
Okay, this was the original one,
This
sorry.
one probably should have came
Okay,
out.
I was going to say, it looks low.
Because the
Okay.
secondary unit is now at
That's right.
76%.
328 instead of 297, okay.
Yeah, it's a couple slides.
So this is what this looked like.
Yeah.
Okay. We had indicated to you that while we kind of tackled a bit the additional residential unit in the first draft you saw, that we really needed to bring back to council a wastewater rate transition plan update. So if you remember in 2019, we did a study, and that study looked at what would it look like if we went to a consumption-based model. So a consumption-based model, they were looking at water meters, water in, water out. And that kind of looked like this. So if we did the conversion all at once, which would be a difficult thing to do for some of the users, given the jumps, but they had proposed that we look at a phase-in plan to get to that 100% consumption. And that's based on our operating capital and all that. But it kind of showed you that back in 2019, almost everything had to go up, and some quite a bit. Going to that model isn't as simple as just putting it on a bill. There's a lot of logistics involved in doing that, and those were kind of highlighted for council, like there's software limitations, issues about water meters, and water bills are with the tenant, and taxes are with the landowner, and right now our sewer is on our tax bill, not a separate bill. There's issues with that where people pay mortgages, and the tax account includes the sewer. It wouldn't, so they'd be getting a separate bill. We can lien a property for not paying the sewer right now, whereas if it's on a water bill, you can't. Like there's a few things that we have to work through. Plus, not only that, just some of the uniqueness of our system, the water system itself, that's not as simple as just making that switch. So to move to that implementation, the software program makes it nearly impossible without perhaps a manual copying of the water meter results into our town suite program for sewer, or for the sewer piece. So we have to find some workarounds to that. So we had just proposed to look at the additional unit this year, knowing that the additional unit and the primary residential unit kind of had the same consumption pieces to it, and why was there such a variation in that, right? To make any changes beyond that gets a little complicated, simply because some of it requires that we do amendments to our sewer bylaw. So when we look at our rates for for wastewater, we have, the bylaw defines residential, it defines other commercial, which includes institutional and industrial. It has a hospital category, a hotel category, and I believe those are it. So if we want to break out categories and say, so we need to break out other commercial and say, an institutional, say schools. We got to kind of define what that is. Is that more than just the junior high, elementary, Parkview, and community college? What about daycares? There's other uses that we could inadvertently end up charging without really realizing it. So it takes a little bit of breaking that out and bringing that back to council to say, here's how other commercial and industrial and institutional should be looked at. For example, a restaurant may have a different type of demand on the sewer system, but could have more demand on the sewer system than a doctor's office, or dentist perhaps, or a clothing store, right, where there's one washroom for the employees. So there's lots of categories in here that aren't we haven't broken it out enough for it to say that it's consumption based and fair. So that was what staff had proposed to do, is to come back to council this year with that breakout, to look at that other commercial, institutional, industrial, and give you a table with uses and what the proposed rates should be in a transition plan to get there. Like, you can decide if you want to go all in a year, if you want to go in 2 or 3, or depending on the increase, whether, some go all in a year and some go over 3. But it's a big piece of information that's missing right now in terms of, so if we just pull out one and just target one, we can't confidently say that's not going to cause a problem, right? And then there's others, so why just one, right? So there's a little bit of wanting to see the bigger picture, or suggesting that you may want to see the bigger picture and how that all looks before making that decision. And that's what this year was supposed to be for staff, and then to kind of give you a plan for how we get over those barriers that we have in our system right now to moving to that water meter based approach to looking at how we bill for sewers. And then there was, of course, the question raised last week about, do we take our sewer and look at moving it into our utility? And what are the advantages of doing that? And if we jump too quick, how are we going to create problems there as well? So, as was indicated, overall, the budget had proposed that we look at an increase of 20%. And then that would result in $750,000 going to reserve. So any increase beyond that is definitely to reserve. And there is a requirement to continue to increase the rates over the next several years, and that's shown in the next slide as well. And that's important to help cover both our capital, or help offset some of our borrowing for that, as well as the operating expenses, which include your debt payments. So this model shows that. And it shows that, or this table, that with these increases that we anticipate that they'll continue until 2029-30, and what the increase percent would be, and what that would mean in terms of the amount transferred to reserve. So you can see in the model, your debt servicing costs go up, your operating costs go up as well. And so the revenue needs to go up to help offset that, as well as continue to build up your reserve. I kind of already went over for this here, this slide here, but just basically saying our plan was to kind of bring you that this year. So this is the slide that shows the increases and the budget's been drafted with option B, which is the middle set of columns that have the blue heading, and that's where the additional residential unit has gone to 328 from what was originally proposed. And we had originally proposed that it increased to 297. And the residential rate would increase by 6.1%, or to 518. and that proposed to remain the same as well. And everything else remain the same, and you can see that making that change in the additional residential sewer brings in $819,000 of revenue versus 741. So that difference is 77,707, which will go into reserve. We do show you what option C looks like, and that was another option that was discussed where the additional residential sewer unit is moved up even higher and closer to the residential sewer rate. So instead of 328, it would be 450. And then the residential sewer rate, the primary one, would remain the same at 518. So that's the sewer. So that's where you were last week.
Right.
And of course, we have the motions here, but it really depends on where you want to land with respects to the tax rate and the sewer rate.
All right. Kim, do you have a presentation, or are you just in the hot seat?
He's in the hot seat now. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's start with questions. Questions from members of council as we drill down to arrive at our final number. Councilor McDonald.
On the wastewater rate, increasing significantly, it's kind of been implied that there's a risk of overcharging because we don't necessarily have all of the information that we need to know in some cases, exactly where we need to end up.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I mean, looking at inflation and what we're paying for projects right now, is that an actual risk, or is it more of a risk that we're going to have trouble catching up?
I think it's more of if you say pull one piece out, so let's say schools, because that was mentioned, right? If you pull that one out in isolation and move that up to 100% cost recovery today, first we have to make sure we all understand what school means, right? So are we clearly looking at just the
just the provincial owned
the provincially, we own the property, so the bill for the junior high and elementary come to us, and then we send that to the school board, but Parkview is owned by the municipality, the property, right? So that would go to them, and then they would send the bill in. Community college. Does it include any other type of educational institution? So there's other programs that are provided for skill development and that type of thing. So are those intended to be part of that, or is it, as I say, just the ones that are operated by the province or the community college? So it's understanding first what we're getting at. And then when you move that there, it's kind of like they're going up to 100%, but how are we going to phase in the others and what's fair and reasonable, right? So you move one up all the way today, and the others, once you see kind of the transition plan, you may be comfortable with 2 or 3 years, but you've taken that one and jumped it up to 100% right away. So the fairness and quality in that, I guess, is the piece where you might regret doing that and wish you had seen that bigger picture first.
Yeah, so you had mentioned earlier, Tammy, about schools, how they're kind of locked in with commercial, industrial, the rate there. Institutional, yeah. So I'm guessing, okay, so that's not something that we can solve tonight, I guess.
You would,
that out, right?
Yeah, you'd have to amend your bylaw.
The grocery store, that would be the same, I suppose. But I guess we do have an opportunity here where we do have a separate rate for hotels. And looking at the wastewater model study from 2019, we do have the recommendation at that time that we were significantly undercharging our hotels on the on sewer. And also in addition would be the hospital. So hospital is separated in our own sewer rates, and that was identified 4 years ago that it was significantly underpaying. So now Councillor McDonald had asked about so is there a risk that we might be overcharging? But I'm guessing
No.
we could look at, these figures that
Yeah.
came from the consultant, I mean, certainly those are figures that we should have been charging 4 years ago.
Yeah, so this is 100% changeover in 1 year. So my comment isn't that, or my response isn't that you could overcharge. It's the phase-in of that
Yeah,
you might have
yeah.
approached differently if you had seen
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, no, there'd be a lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
sticker shock, yeah.
Yeah.
The goal is to get to those rates.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the timing that we have to choose.
Yeah.
And, okay, so any increase that we have in our revenue for sewer rate will basically help offset the, our debt servicing down the road.
It's gonna build up your reserves, which
Yeah.
can then be used to lessen the amount that you have to borrow or deal with Audrey's emergencies that seem to appear every couple months.
Yeah, yeah. And I can appreciate like the chart, one of the slides that were in the presentation where basically it doesn't really matter what kind of tax rate we're charging because from the projections, we have 2 years of grace. And then basically year 3 for, you know, status quo, 5 cents, 8 cents, 10 cents, it's all, yeah, we're still underwater, so, I don't know, any help now that we can put money aside to help offset those ratios, I think would be a good step to take.
The only other thing I would mention, and I can't remember if I did mention or not, is to pull out categories. So from the other institutional, industrial requires a bylaw amendment.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
that's-
one of the things that we do is if you don't have a rate set, right, you can do an interim rate. So our interim bill, like if we don't set the rates tonight, our interim tax bill is going to be sent out based on this year's assessment, last year's rates. And then we do, on the final bill, we do the adjustments with the new rates. Right? So when we think about if we want to do a bylaw amendment to break those out, do we have time between now and we basically have to have those amendments ready to roll and that analysis done on kind of what categories you might want to consider by the end of August, actually August, to do the.
Bills will get prepared again.
For the
Yeah.
final bill
Yeah.
in September.
Yeah, so it doesn't leave a lot of time to do that piece and bring that forward, because then we'd be doing that kind of in July. We'd have to have basically the report and the analysis done by July, and council's doing their second reading in August for the bills to go out in September.
Yeah. Oh, I know, I mean, we're behind the 8 ball there, but, I mean, at least we have 2 categories that are already pulled out in hotels and hospitals, more or less, right?
Yeah, they've given us those numbers in terms of what that would have looked like based on the water meter information that was available, I believe, at that time.
At that time.
In
not
2019.
currently.
Yeah.
Which even the hospital, I looked at the previous 4 months just from today, and their consumption's down quite a bit, so they got to 72,000, but I can't get to that number.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
today's consumption, so.
But we do have a sewer rate for hospitals, and we do have a sewer rate for hotels, right?
Yep.
Oh, right, yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions, Councillor Taylor?
Maybe a comment or a question, I'm not sure. Every time I see those debt servicing ratios and debt ratios and servicing costs, it creates a real pit in my stomach because there's just no easy way out of it. I don't believe we'll see the province be some bold sort of leader and say, let's change the tables here and shift, funding from those that perhaps don't need as much to those that, like us, that have the infrastructure, have the roads and so on and really require it. I think the wastewater project tender tonight was another real wake-up call for us. It's probably not going to get any better in the short term. The fact that we have a development on Aberdeen that has to develop its own septic system, we can't accommodate as a town, is really scary to me. And then I look at the provincial education increase. They did that because they need the money. They didn't come to us saying, hey, can we talk about this or anything like that. They just increased it $175,000. And so when I look at the hospital situation, you know, it should be much higher, which would generate 75,000. The second residential unit should be at 450, a little less than the first, so it's still a little lower. That's going to generate another 300,000. So just that $400,000 extra is really going to make a difference on the debt servicing and the debt ratios going forward. And I just don't see us getting out of this hole unless we really just go at it hard now and make it easier in the longer term. So more of a comment than a. But
Yeah, and I think that, because one of the things that we had raised before was kind of exploring what would be the benefits or the disadvantages of moving our wastewater into a utility. It's somewhat of a little bit of a smoke and mirrors in a way, because you do, like, it's still debt, but it takes it off the town's books and the town's debt service ratios, right? So it gives the town a little bit more room to deal with other things, while the utility bills and the rates are going to look like user pay, because
Right.
the utility review board are going to be approving those rates based on the proposals that we would send in. But I think that those are things that we're probably going to have to take a really good hard look at, because you're right, that's not sustainable to continue. Like, we have no choice because we have growth, but it's really like putting us in a corner.
And just to clarify on the education rate, it's based on uniform assessment times the rate. The rate didn't change, just everybody's uniform assessment went up.
Right.
We don't have the school board's budget, so they haven't given us an increase. We won't have that for 2 more months. So we've taken our uniform assessment times the same rate we've had for the past number of years. So they could technically
hang on to it?
reduce their rate times our uniform assessment. Like, that one's not
Yeah.
set in stone. I just
Okay.
wanted to clarify.
Okay.
They did not send us a bill. They did not send us a budget. It's just the same formula we've used. We know our uniform assessment. We know the rate, the education rate that's applied to the municipalities.
Got it.
Sorry. I just didn't want.
No, good point.
So really, it's just an arbitrary measurement.
Well, it's.
Right now.
Yeah, which,
It's an estimate right
could
now,
do, yeah.
but everyone's uniform assessment went up.
Yeah.
All the municipalities, no one had a decrease in their uniform assessment. And then in times an education rate that is set by the province.
Yeah.
And they haven't changed that rate in a
It's
number of
probably
years.
yeah, no, so I guess what I'm saying is that,
It's not based on.
it's just based on whatever formula they've been using.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really, you're taking your, you know, your heart out of the decision in what you want a municipality to pay. So, I mean, really logically, a school should be paying a little bit more than $1,000 or $3,000 they are annually for their sewer. But anyway, again, that'll be something we'll have to tackle for a bylaw amendment, I guess.
Councillor Thorburn.
Yeah, I'm almost in the boat as creating a utility, same as we do with the water rates. And you know, I think our residents, in fairness to them, should be paying for the water that they use. We do that with our drinking water. You set a tax rate amount on wastewater, and then if you use 1,000 liters, you pay so much for it. And that's the only fair way of taxing anybody, to make numbers up. And we don't have enough information to make the numbers up, but that's the only fair way to the residents, for anybody using that utility to get a fair treatment. So I think that's something this council, or maybe the next one, if not this one, should be looking at, creating a utility with a utility review board based on information and history will make decisions that are cost-effective and relevant.
I think the good news is we don't need to create the utility. One of the options would be putting it into the PSC.
Yeah, we'd have to.
Well, we could do that too.
Make an application to do that.
But it is a discussion we have to have.
We have to have that discussion because that gives us flexibility to put the numbers where they should be, and then the town really is not burdened with that tax rate as part of our stuff.
It takes the debt, yeah,
Right.
it removes that, and it would move it towards a cost recovery model for
Right.
sure.
Yeah.
Some of those barriers are still there. We can do the the concept of billing by water meter is whether we're with the town or it's with the utility, it's going to be the same issues that we have to overcome, right?
Right, yeah.
Some of them are gone away, like, because then it's now a bill from the PSC as opposed to a tax bill and that type of stuff, but.
Yeah, and we wouldn't want to assume just because you consumed water that you're then putting that in our wastewater system, which is another issue.
We can't without a meter. You don't know.
They might put a meter on.
It's a different way of estimating
Yeah.
use of the wastewater system, but it may also not be any more precise than a flat.
There are best practices out there, because other communities do charge like the in and the out, so it's,
I think,
certain, like if you use 100 liters in, they might charge you, make the assumption 90 liters out, because maybe you did water your lawn, so it didn't go out, but most of it. Yeah,
just
there's a
kind of
way to do
making
it.
sure that,
It's
yeah.
Probably a fairer way than what we're doing now.
Yeah, they had
Industrial
suggested.
and manufacturing and different
Yeah.
uses like that, there may, a greenhouse
Or Michelin, for example, they may use their water in their process more than put it back into our system. But that's why Jerry and Blaine had also recommended that it not just be solely based on the water meter, but you look at a flat rate plus, like a
Percentage.
base rate, I guess you call it, right? Yeah, and then you have a rate based on consumption. So there's.
Deputy Mayor
Yeah,
Fisher.
and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but I know there's two things going around with concern of the fees not being sustainable, and looking at bylaw changes moving forward, but then there's also the talk of consumption. So I just worry, okay, if we invest all this time in doing the bylaw changes and then we're gonna have the software consumption, adapt that, will there be, I know you probably can't put a timeline on, are we close to getting to the consumption model, or we're quite a ways?
I would suggest that our
yeah.
software provider probably has limited capacity to deal with our issue. They're forcing
Okay.
us to migrate to a cloud-based, for example,
Okay.
without notice, so that's
Yeah.
fun.
Okay.
And so it's a big request without choosing entirely different software, or it's really complicated, and there's some
Yeah.
other problems we need to solve while we go. So I'll suggest that, when we do come back to talk to you about sewer rates, the bylaw allows consumption-based billing.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's not that that's not an option within the bylaw. It gives us 3 different options for billing. So it did open it up a few years ago. However, there are some issues with, the water meter is attached to a structure and the sewer is attached to land. And so an assessment account number and a water utility number have 0 linkage in our accounting system.
Okay.
They're not linked together. So it's not an easy solution for our software provider to do that, because there could be more than one water utility or water meter on one assessment account number. And so they would have to reinvent their software a bit.
Okay.
Or quite a bit to
An
solve
easy
our
fix.
problems. So it's really like a really big software issue. And they don't have other customers asking for that same thing. The only thing they have people doing is taking the water bill and having a water rate on it and a sewer rate on it, which is easier to do. There would be some manual ones that are gonna fall outside that, but when the sewer rate's just based on water and not a property tax, it changes it. However, as you can see, we're suggesting the revenue get to the $6 million mark, and then that entirely becomes uncollectible, really, whereas it's secured by the tax, as a tax, as a lien on the property that we can use to recover those funds through tax sale. Being on the water bill, on water, we just have the ability to turn water off. So if it were a separate sewer utility, it's hard to turn sewer off, for example. So it's the security of that revenue stream as well. So it's complicated.
Councillor McDonald.
So in my understanding, we are probably going to need new software at a cost and a lot of time.
Customizations to
The
our software.
customization of our existing software or different software would
So
both
another
be
big
fairly
cost.
costly.
And a lot of time.
Maybe. Depends where we, when I look at this is a big discussion. right? The wastewater, I think we all probably went into budget going, wastewater, yeah, we'll pick some numbers based on these categories and we'll get to where we need to go. And then it just became very complicated because, you know, in some cases we're doing a large increase for this group. The school one is very, very valid, but we haven't broken that out as a category, so that's a bylaw change if we want to do that. So I think we're all on the same page that we need to do something with the school rate, but it's not as easy as deciding tonight to change the school rate. Like wastewater is probably a very long meeting just like single topic a few times between the rate itself and discussing the barriers we have with software, the best practices, how other communities do it, utility or not, because as we've just heard from the Director of Finance, the big downside to moving to utility is now it's unsecured. So easy to collect now, not so easy to collect down the road if we move to a utility, but the pros of the utility are that it solves your debt service ratio issue. It doesn't solve it, you still have to pay the debt, obviously, but it keeps us well below that 15%. It's just a big discussion, and again, I think we all came into budget going, okay, we'll deal with tax rate and we'll deal with wastewater, and it just became this big beast. Councillor Caldwell, I see that, I don't know if you have any questions. I don't want to forget you there.
I will mention about the comment about the sewer rates. So I absolutely agree that they need to change, and it's a big issue, complicated. I'd rather stick with what we have in the budget for now, and then deal with it more methodically over the next year. As we plan for hospitals and schools and all institutions, that sort of thing. I think we need a more thorough plan going forward, but I don't have the appetite to deal with that tonight beyond what's already planned in the budget.
Thank you. More questions? Yeah.
I guess just one comment to that. I believe the 2019 study said where the hospital should be.
Based on their water consumption at that time.
So I put some value or some logic in that based on that study that we did. And I guess just one question. So are staff now going to have to reassess the capital budget based on what we're seeing, what we just saw tonight as an example? Like,
yeah.
Is that debt ratio and debt service, is that going to just explode now because of what we saw tonight?
It may, it opens up a whole bunch of questions because some of, I guess funding's both a blessing and a curse sometimes, right? So some of our funding is tied to a very defined scope.
Sure.
And if we change that scope, then we got to spend hours and hours of work to beg for the permission to change the scope, right? So there's that issue that it would be nice just to say, well, you know what? If we start to have our tenders come in and they're over like that, we're just going to have to scale back, and we might not meet 2039, right? But what else can we do? So we'll scale back and adjust our capital budget accordingly, but not when you're tied to funding, right? And now you have to, as I say, beg or present why that scope needs to change. It's got to go through this huge approval process at other levels, and so that creates a complexity for us. We have to have those conversations with the funders to say, look, we're not the only municipal unit that's experiencing this in Canada. And we really need to know what flexibility is there to change the scope, because that's our only option, is to scale back. You can increase your tax revenue, which that you really have to increase it to have a positive impact on your debt service ratios, right? So that's the only option you have, is more funding or scale it back.
So I was even just going to add, you made the comment of putting it in the reserves will help lower our debt service ratio, but we're seeing that amount of money really won't. It won't. We literally need millions of dollars. And the example of the tender tonight just shows you, if we have to rescope all this work, it's going to be a very difficult conversation with the province. I go back to what I said earlier: is if you want all this growth from tip to tip of Nova Scotia, you want to double the population by 2050 or whatever it is, it's impossible for us. First of all, we're a growth center, right? So during COVID, we saw growth in almost every community across the province. But really, it is the urban communities, and this, I'm not saying this to put any less value on the rural communities. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to start a fight. Urban centers is, we have all the services. We have, we are the population centers. And we have all the infrastructure. And unless the province is willing to say, we want to double the population and follow that up with, and here's the funding to help you get to it, at some point, we have a very serious discussion around this table of, do we direct staff to no longer accept any more building permit applications? Like, how heartbreaking would that be? But if we can't get our wastewater system upgraded, then we can't meet the target of 2039. And if we can't meet the target of 2039, well, then we can't, how can we be building? But I'm guessing around the table, that's an unacceptable outcome, to have to say, we're not going to grow. So if it's unacceptable to us, and it's unacceptable to the province, and the federal government has immigration targets that they want us to grow as well, so if it's unacceptable to every level of government, then everyone has to chip in. And so, as the CAO said earlier, we have Exit 12A, we have federal money, we have provincial money in that, but all those funding agreements, they have the luxury of saying, and anything that goes even $1 above that, it's all on the municipality.
That's right.
So when you have your $7 million over budget project, that's 100% on us. We don't have the luxury of going, oh, it's a third, and we all rise together. So that's where we are, is part of this discussion for the next 12 months is sitting down with every federal and provincial MLA and MP that we can gather and explaining, not just Bridgewater, but on behalf of every urban community in the province, the seriousness of this. So again, we had the minister here. She asked great questions. She understood, and this is the first minister that recognized that hub model. So if we can nurture that, and it changes some of that funding formula from everything from gas tax to tying. We have this great source of funding, but it doesn't allow us to access any other federal funding. Well,
Or to change the scope.
Or to change the scope. And I don't even understand the point of that. The point is the funding is to get the project done, but he won't allow us to access more funding to help us get the project done. It's frustrating. But it's a big discussion. It would be so much easier if, listen, our budget was just filled with fat and we could just cut all this stuff and we don't do this, we don't do that, and problem solved. But it's not. You could see from every meeting that we had, and the list that the CAO put up is $15,000 here, it's $6,000 there. I saw what made your list was a $982 reduction in the cost for the library rent to the LCLC. But it's significant because there's not a lot else. We need every dollar. So, if it's reassuring for the ratepayers in Bridgewater, it's that there's no fluff in the budget. We are running as lean as we can. And I think we've explained this very well over the last 5 years, that we have $50 million worth of wastewater work done, and we have to pay for it. And we should have been paying for it over the last 40 years, and we didn't. And it was a mistake, and we have to own the mistake. So this council, previous council, all the councils that go back 40 or 50 years should have listened to their director of finance, and maybe said, you know what, I don't think the sewer rate is based on consumption. I think we should probably make sure we do some asset management and things like that. But now we're doing the right things. Unfortunately, our timeline is shortened. Not our decision, and it's not the wrong decision. We shouldn't be overflowing the river. Anyway, I could go on forever on this, but it's just, we need funding and we need support, and we're not getting the level of support that we need. Even if you flip that gas tax funding around and you made it needs-based, not population-based, that would put a dent in it. Councillor McDonald.
Just a comment that we're addressing the wastewater infrastructure aggressively because we have to. And the financial side has to keep pace with it. We're starting from behind. So I don't see, and there is no other source. Like you said, we could rely on the province to change their funding models or their timelines and how they allocate funding to us and so on. That's not going to address our problem in the timelines we need to address it. So we have to do it within our own means, and that is through usage and I know it's gonna take some time to get over those hurdles, and there's nothing that's been said around the table tonight that I disagree with, but I think this side of things has to be approached as aggressively as the fix for the infrastructure. I don't think we have a choice. I would love to tell people we're not gonna move anything this year. We're just gonna figure out a really great game plan and not change rates, but that's just not an option. It's not on the table for us. And so I'm not saying we change, we start going after all of the deficiencies, because I know that a lot of them are very complicated. But like Councillor Tanner said, that secondary unit and the hospitals, those are ones we can address those without huge risk of a misstep. We know we have enough information to make a change, and I don't think that we're gonna look back and say, oops, we've gone too far. I think we're still gonna be pushing forward for many, many years with it. So yeah, I don't see an option here.
Other comments around the table? Councillor Thorburn.
Just one, but I think we've talked about everything, we're just going around in circles. We don't have any time, we circle our way, but I guess the bottom line for me is we can only charge our residents so much. And I think we've charged them as much as I'm prepared to charge them this year, because we've been doing this for the last 3 or 4 years. We've come a long way, we've got a lot of ways to go, but charging them a full amount this year is not going to give us nearly enough money to make any difference in getting these projects done. There's not enough money, no matter how much we increase them, to do what we need to get done. So the federal government and the provincial government is going to help us. We can't do it. There's just no way that people can pay that much money. We've increased their taxes a fair amount, and then we're trying to get 10% to keep a 3-year plateau, so they're not paying every year, which I think is a good move. If we can agree to go 10 cents instead of 8, that's going to buy that extra year. But once this budget is passed, I think we owe it to the residents. And we got 9,000 people in Bridgewater. Then we've got to come up with a plan to get a fair system in place that everybody's paying their fair share. But you can't just target the poor old homeowners in those apartments where you may have your mother-in-law living in your basement apartment that's not using any water, and charging her as much as you're charging somebody with a wife, 5 and 3 or 4 kids. It don't make sense. I'm prepared to vote for the budget for what we have in the budget tonight. Otherwise, I will vote against it. No more increases. That's as far as I'll go.
Councillor Conklin.
No, I agree with Councillor Thorburn that, really it doesn't matter how much we increase the sewer rate. It's really not going to tackle the overall monster. But, okay, so on the other hand, why are we even looking at increasing the sewer rate at all if it's not going to do anything? I mean, 4 years ago, we were told that these are the rates that we should be charging, okay? And we're still a far way away from that, with the exception of the primary residential rate. So, if, we want to look at slapping on a 10-cent tax rate increase and increasing the sewer rates as well, sure, that's going to hurt the homeowner, our taxpayers, but really, I mean, one thing, I guess, a lot of this just doesn't make sense, right? What doesn't make sense to me is that the hospital, for example, paid about $5,000 last year, I think, in sewer rate. So that's equivalent to about 10 houses. So, you got us taxpayers of Bridgewater subsidizing the water for the hospital, and it's just tough. I know we're in a bad predicament, but there's just so many different things. No matter which way you look at it, you're gonna have questions on does it make sense or not. But, certainly, I would like to lean on the recommendations of not Barley Tyler, Blaine and Lane, Jerry and Lane. Sorry, Blaine and Jerry.
Jerry, yeah.
Okay, and get to those figures as quickly as possible, really.
I think we're all on the same page of getting there, so that's, and Councillor Caldwell raised this at the last meeting, that, the timeline maybe needs to be shortened to get us to there. The one that I'd certainly be willing to move on is the hospital rate. But the rest, you're already looking at a 76% increase for the secondary units. So going to 140% increase in 1 year, if you want to get there next year, I would support that. I know you mentioned the hotel as well. So just, we're still coming out of post-COVID for tourism. So I think going from 3,700 to, I'm just looking at the chart of the 2019 chart, going up to 12,000, 3 times increase, I think is a bit steep. I'll go back to my other chart. Where's my
Hotels paid around 12,000 last year.
Okay,
with,
so that
with the main charge plus additional hotel.
Okay, so they're almost up at where they're supposed to be anyway. Am I looking at that right? Where do you see that for hotels?
So I'm looking at the chart that I thought was the current one.
So, but the current one doesn't show that number?
No, it shows the 22-23 rates. So the hotel was 1,036, and so the total revenue for 4 was 4,145, and then the additional hotel. There's 193 of those units at $59.59 for 11,000. So that's for all of them, right? So this is just saying for one, and the other chart it's 12,000.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean.
So multiply by 4.
Like I said, the school one, that's complicated to talk about that. The hospital one, I was ready to go right with Councillor Tanner on that one until the Director of Finance said when she does the math, she can't come up with $72,000 of the consumption for their use because they've decreased it. So it takes me back to, we need to really sit down and have a discussion on, I mean, it has to be updated, because if it's not accurate, then there's the risk of overcharging. I don't think any one of us is going to feel too bad overcharging the province, although at the end of the day, there is just one taxpayer, so it's coming out of somebody's pocket.
We may want to do that exercise on the other use categories too, to make sure that 29 chart is still relevant based on water consumption, just to that point, right? So hotels may have reduced their water consumption as well as schools, and Michelin has for sure, right?
Too.
So that's 4 years old, and maybe we need to, before you make a decision like that we may want to run that analysis based, because we have the data, right? Like, yeah.
So for me, I'm pretty. Nobody's happy with the budget. Let's face it. With increases, we're not happy. So I'm satisfied with the option B revised, knowing that council is going to have a discussion on where rates need to be. And like I said, Councillor Caldwell said we need to reduce this timeline. I think we all nodded our heads in agreement at that meeting that this timeline that gets us to that 0% that was on that other chart needs to be probably a couple of years sooner. Maybe that satisfies some of the need around the table to build up that, because that would still be going to reserve. So maybe it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. You're getting that number, but you're just getting to it sooner. So I don't know if that helps, but it's clear that we have some homework to do on this. I'd also like to look at the sewer connections outside of town as well, because I think those are longer. They're obviously outside of town, so they're further away from our treatment plant. It's a lot of infrastructure to run, and it should cost more to run infrastructure that far. So that's just, but again, that's part of a larger discussion. Councillor McDonald, you had your hand up.
It just occurred to me, I never really asked if any others are willing to share, when you say shorten up the timeline, what are you talking about? I'm making assumptions of what you're talking about, so that's not fair.
So in the chart, it says the last year that we charge, we have a projected rate increase. It's the 2930. That's 10%, and then it's 000. So what was that? Is that 7 years? I think, Councillor Caldwell, you talked about 5 years, knocking that down to 5.
That's what I suggested,
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah.
So it's, you're taking 2 years off.
So that's 10 years since we did the sewer study.
Mhm.
10 years since we did a sewer study to change the sewer rate is what it would be,
Yeah.
to get to where we should be.
To get to where you,
Yeah.
you've been increasing it, like
get to where it
previously,
should
about
be.
15% a
5
year.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not like we didn't do anything, right? We were increasing.
I'm
it
not
50
saying, no, I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying, like, that's an awful long time to have everybody else subsidizing it.
Just wondering, could you put up slide 23 again, 10-year operating mode? I don't know if that's the
For
same.
the tax rate or for?
Yeah, tax rate options.
Yeah.
Where it shows, yeah, okay. So, so based on this model here, a tax rate increase of, say, just a little over 5 cents would give us basically a wash this year, right?
For
no
this year.
surplus, no deficit.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I can appreciate, you know, the
Yeah.
benefits of tax rate stabilization and all that, but,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. So, the bare minimum we would need, keeping everything in the budget, we would, looking at about 5.5 cents.
So 1 cent equals 83,000
On commercial and retail.
in residential.
Residential.
So,
Councillor Thorburn and then Councillor McDonald.
I guess the good news, based on our last discussion, when we talked, that special purpose tax is going to be roughly done in 4 years, which is, I think it was 27, 28.
That
Yeah.
would be the last year. we
That would be the
charging
last
it.
year, so we've gained a couple of years on that. So, and that's going to save everybody 6 cents, so that's a good side of it. But
Yeah.
then,
Yeah, the problem with that is we're gonna need more. Anyway, don't worry.
well, you know, but there's got to be a little good news in there, Andrew. At least that 6 cents would be saved.
Silver lining.
And that's shared with another municipal unit, so.
Councillor McDonald.
On the 3 years without a tax increase, if we increase 10 cents, how much confidence can we have in that? I mean, we tried that, and we got hit with a lot of
COVID.
unknowns and variables, yeah. I'm not expecting another pandemic, gosh, knock on wood, but how confident can we be that we'll get 3 years? I'm not confident in anything right now, and in order to increase that much, I feel like I should be confident in saying you're gonna get a good 3 years out of this.
So I have more confidence now, just based on the last, we thought we'd get 4 years out of the last one, and we got 3. So, in a time.
The pandemic, yeah.
Well, with CPI, right? It was really
Yeah.
CPI that did it this year. If we didn't have the, what do we have, 8%?
It ended up being 6 point something,
6.7%.
yeah.
So if we
plus-
didn't have that, we would have been right on target. And so, you know, the confidence that I have is that we're, you know, things will start to settle. It's not gonna be easy for the next couple of years, but I don't know if that helps you.
It does.
I had the same question, like, what happens next year or the year after, but I think we're seeing some signs of, you know, the federal government acting to kind of push that down.
yeah. And it's
get you, though.
the best you can do based on the information you have today.
Right,
Sure.
it's a model, so
Yeah.
by tomorrow, it's empty. You know,
Yeah.
every time I see,
Yeah.
so the gas, fuel prices are a big driver of CPI. So every time I see the gas price go up or down, I'm like, what's that mean? And, you know, just trying to, you know, so it's assessed values and it's growth, so new properties help alleviate pressure that's maybe not in this model because we don't know the level of growth we're gonna have in expansion, just assessment growth, that's all that's really in this model.
Well, if you look at the
So
potential
there is
development.
potential upside, and we're very conservative by saying, you know, the growth we've had isn't gonna continue, so that'll level out. And so, you know, but interest rates are going up, which affects our debt service, and so there's things that, you know, it might seem like changes in the, you know, that are being made to lower CPI, they also affect us in a negative way in that our borrowing rate's likely going to increase as that, so it's moving all around, and it's really hard to predict where we're going to be in 6 months, because 6 months ago we didn't know we'd be here.
A lot of my confidence is built into the fact that we've approved a number of developments, high-value developments. Just the two on King Street, and when you look at their proposals and the tax revenue from those, we know that Exit 12A, that's many years out, but there'll be increased tax revenue from that. Look at the potential if the mall development goes through. You can just do the math, commercial times, and so you can look at some of that, but it is years out. But it's, you hope that it's still going to go ahead, and if it does, then there's some increase in revenue for that. It's the cost with it, but.
So are we ready for a motion?
If you want to put a motion on the floor, we can.
All right, here we go.
Go from there.
Sit down and fasten your seatbelts. I would move that council for the town of Bridgewater approve the 2023-24 budget tabled as follows. 1, a capital budget amount of $14,766,000 with funding including reserve transfers as presented in this agenda package. 2, an operating budget amount of $28,820,259 with revenue and expenditures totaling $28,820,259, including the reserve transfers as presented in this agenda package. 3, a commercial tax rate to be set at $4.07 per hundred of the fully assessed value of the property. 4, a residential tax to be set at $1.85 per $100 of adjusted assessed value after cap. 5, a special purpose tax for the payment of a debenture, principal and interest for the Lunenburg County multipurpose centers as follows. Commercial tax rate set at 6 cents per $100 of fully assessed value of the property. Residential tax rate to be set at 6 cents per $100 of adjusted assessed value of the property after cap. 6, an interest rate paid on capital reserve to be set at 0%. 7, in accordance with policy 92, the interim tax bills will be generated with this current year's taxable assessment and the last tax rate set by council, which will be the 2023-24 tax and sewer rates approved April 11, 2023, prior to printing of the interim bills. The interim tax bill will be due Wednesday, May the 31st, 2023. 8, the interest rate on the overdue accounts be set at 12 cents per annum, charged at 1% per month. And the final 9, the final tax billing will be current year's taxable assessment and the tax and sewer rates set by council in the 23-24 budget. The final tax bill will become due on Friday, September 29, 2023.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
Second that.
Councilor Tanner. Further discussion? We've had good discussion, but further discussion on that?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Councilor Thorburn, would you like to make the next motion? Put that on the table and we can debate that one.
I would move that pursuant to Chapter 24, the Public Sewers Bylaw, Section 28, Council for the Town of Bridgewater approve the sewer rates as follows. The owner of every house, shop, or other property within the Town of Bridgewater connected to the public sewer of the Town of Bridgewater shall pay to the town for each property owner by himself, her, a charge or rate of use of the sewage system as follows. Residential and land lease communities, one dwelling unit, $518 plus $328 for each additional dwelling unit. Homes and motels, basic charge of $1,109 plus $79 for each guest unit. Hospitals, basic charge of $4,922 plus $79 for each patient bed. Other commercial shopping centers, institutional and industrial users, for the first user, $1,109 plus $742 for each additional user. The owner of every house, shop, or other property within the municipality of the District of Lunenburg connected to the sewage connection system in Hibbville shall pay to the town a charge or rate of use of the sewage system as follows. Residents and land lease communities per unit, $624. Commercial shopping centers, institutional and industrial users per unit, $1,300.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Deputy Mayor Fugere. Further discussion?
Question.
We're quick on the question.
We talked about it for 3 nights.
All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. I'd just like to, well, I'll start by thanking Kim and her finance staff for putting together a budget. Not easy. Not that any of them are easy, but this was particularly challenging between coming out of COVID and CPI and all the other challenges that we've faced. You know, I applaud you for keeping us on the right path, and your staff, and just senior management and all your teams that you have, you know, and the CAO. And I'm going to call out Audrey just because wastewater is just so, you know, it's constant. I can't imagine. I'm sorry you have to go through all this, but you know, it makes the day go quick. Anyway, I just, we would not be able to make these decisions without your guidance and your information, your expertise. So on behalf of council, thank you, and please pass on our thanks and gratitude to your teams. And the chief, you're at the back. You look like, and you're awake still? Yeah?
I've been awake through
all right, awesome. Anyway, and thank you, of course, to our first responders and our 2 chiefs. And then, of course, I have to thank council. We've had a great discussion. I love that we can have this discussion and respectfully and value everyone's opinion. I know that's not the case across the country, and unfortunately, it's not the case across this province. You set the bar very high. You set a great example for others. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be the mayor of this community with the councilors around this table. So thank you so much for all your time and effort. And finally, I'm going to call out Ms. Porter-Lowe, as this is her last budget.
Oh,
no.
And
it's
no way.
It's told them not to move the Kleenex too far. Anyway, it's
Do you want that?
it's you're going to be missed, and I'm going to try not to cry. Anyway, I'd be lost without you, and I hope whoever sits there next will also kick me or pass a little note saying, "Gotta do this," or keep me on track. But thank you so much for all your years of service. I know you're going to miss us all, and I know you're excited for this to be your last budget. Anyway, thank you everyone so much, and thank you, Sandra. And you can always come back and sit through budget.
Sit with the fire chief?
Yeah.
I'll watch the live stream.
Sure you will. All right. No further ado. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Councillor Thorburn, seconded by Councillor Conklin. We are adjourned. Thank you.